All right, good evening. We're going to call the meeting to order at 7:17. First is our flag salute. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call.
For a roll call, Ms. Bollenbacher.
Here.
Mr. Chandler. Here. Ms. Compatella.
Here.
Mr. Marks. Here. Mr. Oliverio.
Here.
Ms. Pokalnik.
Here.
Mr. Radia.
Here.
Mayor Perry.
Here.
Solicitor Corbel.
Here.
And myself. Thank you.
Next is the consent agenda. Approval of the minutes from our last meeting on February 9th and the bill list from February 23rd. Both these are on the OneDrive, so motion to approve the February 23rd, 2023 consent agenda.
So moved.
Ms. Compatello,
Second.
second, Mr. Chandler. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Public comments on agenda items. At this time, citizens may address the Crafton Borough Council on any issue appearing on today's agenda. Only residents and taxpayers of the Borough of Crafton will be permitted to address the council. Comments on non-agenda items will be taken at the end of tonight's meeting. Speakers will be permitted to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. Groups of people will be required to designate a spokesperson to represent them before the council, who may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Please state your name and physical address for the record. Do we have anybody signed in? None? Okay. Anybody on Zoom, you would raise your hand. Okay. All right. We are acknowledging receipt of the written reports. These are all listed here on the agenda and in the OneDrive for our council to review. Okay. President's report. I have nothing to report at this meeting. Mayor's report.
Nothing tonight either.
Okay. Solicitor's report.
I'll make it 3 for nothing to report this evening.
Okay. Manager's report.
I do have a few things to report.
Right.
Okay, just wanted to update everyone with a few things that are going on. We have officially moved to a new registration system, Pool Pass, for the pool. And I worked with the manager of the pool today, actually to review that and to go through the process. So that's all set. I'm meeting with, we have a GIS system called Tracer that tracks our properties. And I'm working with them next week to improve our reporting on that so that we can have much more robust reporting for the code work and inspection work that's being done on a weekly basis. The parks plan, the final parks plan, we will be receiving from EPD that was adopted 2 weeks ago. We're receiving it with the updated images and whatnot that DCNR asked for. So that will be uploaded to the website next week. The Civil Service Commission is working on getting a solicitor currently. Their solicitor had retired, so we're working on getting them a solicitor for that process. And I wanted to let council know that there might be some issues with the roof. I know that those of you who have been in the building have seen that we've had leaks in the past. It turns out after some investigation that immediately after this one was installed, there were issues. And pretty much every manager since they have been installed has looked into fixing that. So we've had some challenges around that, and we're looking into whether there's a solution there with that company. And then we are working on purging documents in the office. And with that, there is a disposition resolution on the agenda as a part of the Pennsylvania Boroughs Code. When we dispose of any documents, we have to follow a pretty strict guidelines on when to get rid of those. So we've been following that process. There has not been a purge in the office for more than 10 years. So you can imagine we have so quite a bit of paperwork to go through. So we've been going through that process. And because of that, we have a motion, and that is to dispose of what we already have collected. There will be another one, just because the amount of disposition that we have to get rid of, amount of dated documents that we have to get rid of, what will overtake my office if we don't do it in pieces. So with that, I would like for a motion to approve resolution 2023-004 for the disposition of dated borough documents.
So moved.
Mr.
Second.
Marks, Ms. Compitello, discussion? Mr. Price, one question I had on this was, they're very specific on the dates on the resolution. What happens next year or the year after when those dates start to move from a year to year? Do they have to be more like we keep these for 7 years, 6 years, 5 years versus anything before 2017 needs purged?
That's a great question. I did write down the years on the disposition document, but yes, it's based on how many years old they are. And there is I don't know, Solicitor Corbel, you might be able to tell me there's an 80-page document that
From the.
yeah.
Historical. Commission.
Yeah, so every type of document has a different date. So luckily, lots of them are all in one group, but yeah, there are a lot of different things to look up, and it's specific to each different type of document. With that being said, we need to update our resolution.
We have a motion on the table, so that was the
Yes,
discussion.
my
Any other
apologies, my
discussion
apologies, yes.
on the documents? Okay. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Great, sorry for jumping the gun there. This next resolution is for Chartiers Valley Flood Control Authority. We did have a counselor who's no longer on the board on that authority, and we also have Doug Sample, who is now no longer the manager, on that as the representative, and we want to change me to be the representative for the Chartiers Valley Flood Control Authority, and then we are looking to appoint another board member as well.
Right, and upon discussions, the person before was Philip Lavasser, who's very involved in this. And I know that Kirsten has been involved, of course, with the planning side and a lot of the sewer responsibility through the infrastructure committee. So, you know, I'd like to nominate Kirsten to be that member for the CVFCCA representative for Crafton. Are there any other nominations?
Does she want to be nominated? Do you want me to speak up and say that I'm willing to be nominated? I have agreed to do so if it pleases council.
Yeah. And I think the requirement is God bless you. There's a meeting in March that happens that you attend, and I think they're just the representative. I don't think there's a lot of involvement around it. Anyone else interested? There's a motion. So the motion would be to approve resolution 2023-005, appointing Kirsten Compitello and Jim Price to the CV Flood Control Authority.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Mark, okay, Mr. Chandler and then Mr. Mark seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Great, thank you. And I think I have one other thing. I just want to pull this up. Oh, yes. Update on the phone bill that we had that was costing us $500 a month that has been canceled, and nothing failed when we did it. So that's good. No, the elevator still works and all of the other doohickeys around the building still work. We also found that we've been paying more than $2,800 a year for Zoom, And we've now diminished that bill down to about $400 because most of the services that we had never even accessed. So we have now switched that to a much more affordable level. And we're looking at other ways to save money in that way. But that's it. Thank you.
I would like to mention that in my conversations with the chief, this has been going on for close to 20 years. And I would like to congratulate Jim for being the first manager in his first week to have discovered this and got it taken care of. Thank you, Jim.
That was
Thank
the,
you.
which one? The Verizon?
The Verizon bill, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and I echo that in terms of lots of improvements here, you know, as you mentioned just in your report, and it's only been a month. So we certainly appreciate it, and our residents do too. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Standing committee reports, finance and administration, Ms. Perry.
Nothing new to report. Our next meeting will be ahead of our next council meeting.
Great. Community services and infrastructure, Ms. Compatello.
Sure. For my committee, the first update is about the multi-municipal zoning project. The steering committee did meet about 2 weeks ago, and the zone co-consultant that's leading our zoning project will be present virtually, but they will be present at the upcoming planning commission meeting, which will be this next Tuesday, February 28th at 6:30. It's the usual scheduled planning commission meeting. It is available on Zoom. The planning commission meetings have been conducted on Zoom for several years now, and the login is unchanged. The information to access that is on the Borough website. So the zone co-consultant will be present at that planning commission meeting this upcoming Tuesday. They'll be talking with the planning commission members, and if there are any members of the public who would like to attend and be able to listen in on that discussion and participate, then I encourage you to attend the planning commission meeting. Unchanged update, I guess, from the past week, or the past council meeting or so, is that we are continuing to talk with our zone co-consultant on the zoning project about what the next phase of public engagement will be. It is still anticipated in roughly April. We haven't set dates or a specific set of activities yet, but we should have information in March to start promoting some kind of public engagement activity or event in April. We'll definitely be promoting that in advance. The next item is the 2023 road paving program. Crafton has a 5-year road paving plan. We are already several years into it. We have been relying on data analytics that were conducted throughout the borough to monitor and assess our street conditions. According to that data analysis that was done, a list of streets were identified in varying different conditions. And over the past few years, we've been addressing upgrades to those streets according to what our budget allowed and what the streets were that needed the most attention. For 2023, our engineer has identified a list of streets for our 2023 paving program. That list of streets is chosen from a combination of the streets that are in poor repair and trying to trying to match up also what best fits into what we have budgeted for this year. So we have a discussion on the agenda tonight to review the paving program for 2023, and we have no formal vote, but we will need to confirm that we would like to have the engineer proceed with continuing with detailed cost estimates of those identified streets. We need to do that so that we can stay on track to secure a contractor for this spring. So the streets that were identified were put onto the OneDrive. I can read off what they were as of the engineering meeting, and I know we have our engineer online. He can hopefully still be able to speak and confirm. I know they were doing a couple of tweaks and just verifications as of the engineering meeting. The streets that were on the list were Station Street, Johnson Street, Chartiers Avenue, Kingston Avenue, Crafton Boulevard, and Chess Avenue. And we can go into detailed discussion, or we might be able to bring up the list since our engineer is online. But these streets, they each are a series of a block or two blocks. It's not necessarily the whole length. It's the section that was identified as being in poor repair. And again, our action item here is just that we have this 5-year paving plan. This is, we are several years into this paving plan. These are the streets that are next up that best align with our budget for this year. And we are just sharing this information for council and confirming that we're going to continue with seeking out the more detailed cost estimates and seeking a contractor to continue with implementing this paving program.
Can you address the brick streets?
There are no brick streets on this list.
They aren't a part of. the study.
Are there any questions on that? I know that's,
I have a
it's
question.
it's an update, but it's a lot of information.
Yeah, and I was just looking back over it, right? So we listed the 25 worst and we have some notes in here for like target dates and when we're going to evaluate things. And I mean, it looks like a number of them. So we have like 9 listed on 25 worst, labeled 2023, not the reevaluate ones, just straight 2023, but we only have like 8 down below. And then we have a whole bunch that are rated up top, like up top. I guess I know we're trying to budget for this. Do we already have all the estimates and stuff? And we're just trying to prioritize and fit it all into each year?
The engineer has done some rough estimates to try to assess out of all of these streets and all of these different lengths and distances of streets, how can we get the most impact within the budget that we have? We do also have we have ratings for all of these streets, and it is true that there are some that are rated in worse condition, but there are, we've also been looking at whether there are any conflicts to be considering. There are a few of those that have various other issues that are still outstanding. There are some that are going to be addressed through other projects or are already in the area that may be impacted by an upcoming infrastructure project. We're not going to repave a street that we're going to tear up next year.
And I think there was a 4th column, not on the one you have, but that Doug added with the status of each one, because like the top ones, we're not doing all the top ones because there's something on the side, and he added that onto the OneDrive.
Our engineer, they're several years into this program, so we will in another year or so probably be rerunning that analysis to check the status and the condition of all of our streets so that we can redo another 5-year plan. But at this point, we're just continuing to work through that list, and the engineer has been assessing all those different, like not just the condition of those streets, but also how we can fit it into the budget, which ones best suit this year's budget, and ensuring that we're not addressing anything that's already covered in another upcoming or anticipated to be soon project. So these streets, it comes out very closely. The estimated cost that they have so far at a very rough level comes out very closely to meet the budget that we have. And their next step, if we want to support their proceeding to the next step, is that they will do a more detailed cost estimate for the reconstruction for the repaving of each of those streets. That will then come back to council for us to formalize approving the next step to go to bid and seek a contractor. Our goal is to have a contractor this spring, to have that go out to bid this spring and to select a contractor. If we wait too much longer than that, everyone else is doing this same thing too, and we may not get our road paving program in this year. Any other questions? It's not a formal vote, but are we all comfortable having our engineer continue along this path and continue with next steps to prepare the detailed cost estimates?
Yep. I know we're basing the study, the road study was done in 2021. When's that cadence for that? Like how regularly do we re-up that, just in case something got worse every couple of years or whatever, you know?
So they have recommended redoing it next year.
Cool.
Our next item for my committee is about preventative maintenance. This is another tool we have in our toolbox to maintain our streets and keep them in good shape. In addition to the road paving program, we also have various options to be updating our streets and giving them preventative maintenance treatments to keep them in good shape for longer. It's much cheaper to do the preventative maintenance than to do a full repaving. So we are exploring, we are in talks with Ingram. We have done this in past years as well. Ingram has a couple of products that they like to use. Reclamite and Microseal are the two products that they are looking into using. And we are in talks with them, as we have done in past years as well, to explore a joint contract to purchase Reclamite and Microseal products in a joint contract with Ingram, which allows us to buy those quantities at lower price for each borough. There also, we don't have a formal decision tonight. This is just an update for council that we are exploring that, and the borough manager is talking with Ingram to develop that costing and explore what that joint agreement would be. The general thought so far, correct me if I'm misquoting this because I did write it down, but I want to make sure it's the right number, is that this would likely be about 30,000. So it's not a large investment, but it does help extend the life of our streets. And again, once that is further developed, that would come before council to vote upon.
That was also the number I had too.
Right, stair repairs timeline update. This one's pretty quick, but we have talked in the past about that we've gotten some funding to upgrade and maintain some of the public stairways that we have in Crafton. We did not get to talk about this in detail at the engineers meeting. So if there are more details requested, we can ask them tonight, but we have some executed contracts that are underway. We'll be doing survey work that will take about a month. We'll then be preparing bid specifications that will take another month or so. We will then be going out to advertise and award a bid. That will take about 2 months. And then the construction itself will take 3 to 6 months. So that's an update on the timeline, and that will take us through the end of the year for sure. And then the much bigger one, and this is why our engineer is here tonight, is we have some updates on the pool bathhouse. This has been in the works for some time. They have been doing some conceptual drawings and designs. And as we all know, prices keep rising and things are getting much more expensive. So we have been talking about the cost of the upgrades that are planned for the pool bathhouse, and the fact that that cost has risen beyond what we initially budgeted. Our engineer is here tonight to talk us through in a bit more detail and show some of the visuals to describe what the budget is and what the current design is and what our options are. We've been talking on the engineering committee about potentially phasing that so that we can do a first phase that's better in line with the budget we have and identify which items we can wait and push off for a phase 2 in another year.
All right. Kirsten, would you like me to step in now to discuss further?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So thank you for that introduction. Sorry I can't be there in person. I still have a little bit of a nagging cold that I didn't want to bring to all of you there. But as Kirsten had brought up initially, this project was actually applied for DCNR grant funding back in April of 2021. We were notified of its award. At the time, we were looking at a project with a project cost of right around $600,000, but we were applying for the DCNR Keystone Fund, which kept the grant amount to $250,000 was our cap on the grant amount. During the process, DCNR did notify us that it was being awarded in December of 2021, but at that point, they had also notified us that it was being moved to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is a federal program. So with that, it had to go through National Park Service and would allow for a potential increase in the total grant amount. That process is much more timely and much more difficult to go through, which is why we are just now talking about it. Doug and myself had worked with LWCF, and that grant agreement was finally provided from the National Park Service at the end of 2022 and signed and agreed upon by the borough. And at that time, it was requested that we provide an updated cost estimate. With 2022, we saw significant increases in material costs, as well as increases due to inflation. And at that time, the total project cost was found to have expanded from around $600,000 to $750,000 to $800,000. So a significant increase at the time. This all was based on initial scope of, let me try to share my screen so that I can use some of the visuals to assist.
Justin, can you make him bigger?
Please let me know if you're able to see my screen there.
All good.
Okay, great. So this was one of the exhibits prepared following the meetings and with McLean Architects, who's been assisting with this project. This is for the interior of the bathhouse, which was originally identified that the primary issues associated with the bathhouse were that it was out of ADA compliance, which the floors and in general just needed upgrades and had not been upgraded in quite some time. But in order to be eligible for any grant funding, the ADA compliance would be one of the primary factors. So that in order to upgrade ADA compliance, the entire floor of the locker rooms would need to be replaced because of grade changes. You can't have any grade changes over a 2% cross slope. There was a number of humps or cracks or breaks within it as well. So that was one of the primary factors. But in addition to that, it was upgrading everything inside. One of the other factors would be to allow for a common hallway in order to access the pool. One thing that has already been identified is that the reception counter and the way that people would be greeted as they come in would be adjusted slightly to ensure that, you know, you did not have people that were trying to sneak around that or make their way around that. But those are the primary factors within the development. Some of the additional factors that were considered were to replace the roof while we were there with a standing seam metal roof, to add new lockers to the facility so that you had common lockers that could be utilized, as well as some minor upgrades to the concession area. For the most part, that was staying out of the upgrades, but the upgrades that were considered as additions were to include an additional pull down doors at the openings for the concession stand.
So I know everyone's looking at that image. Dennis is moving on to his next thing. It's again, it's not the final design, but it's evolved enough to help us understand what the cost would be and get to the realization that we'd like to phase this because the cost is more than we budgeted this year.
Yeah. And I did have a follow-up after that meeting too, just I had recalled some discussions with Doug towards the end of last year regarding budgeting. One thing that Doug was able to look up, because this project was anticipated to begin in 2023 and continue through the winter and into spring of 2024 to be completed prior to the pool opening in 2024. Budgeting had actually been broken into two separate pieces. So Doug was able to identify that there was $250,000 worth budgeted for 2023, with another $500,000 budgeted for 2024. So at the time of budgeting, it was considered to include those increases. And I'll get to the cost estimates here in just a second to review that. But ultimately, that is what we're here to discuss today. Sorry, excuse me.
Would it be possible for me to interject something about the budget?
Sure, yes.
So basically, yes, it was divided, but the idea is that 2024 is not decided. And at that time, there was the prospect of having more grant money. So there has never been a decision that's been made by a previous council or this council that says, oh, we're going to spend the whole 500,000 or whatever it is next year. So I just want to be really, really clear about that part of what this is hinging on is the fact that even, we expected the prices to the costs to go up, but there was that prospect of moving it to the federal pot that would have gotten us more money, but at the end of the day, it did not. So
yeah,
that's kind of where we're at this point.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm not sure
and
what
yes,
Doug had pulled from, but the budget we had that we all have that was circulated and approved at the end of last year had $500,000 for the bathhouse. So that's the number that we have in mind. We had 500,000 budgeted total per our budget. And the current cost, and Dennis will get to that, but the current cost is higher.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Ms. Compitello. Again, I'll just bring up briefly, there is some additional site development that would be required just in order to make sure that we maintain and ADA accessibility from the parking lot into the facility, which that does not exist currently. So that would be a piece of the project as well. So following those discussions and looking at that total project cost, that is what we wanted to discuss today, the considerations for that. The cost estimate that you see here was for the entirety of the scope, which as you see, including fees and contingencies, was closer to $800,000. And that is what was utilized when providing to National Park Service as part of that grant. And we are still working with them in order to try to see if there is additional funding possible. Most likely through the grant that has already been awarded, the most that would be accepted would be a total of a 50% match or 50% grant, which would be about $400,000 worth of grant funding with approximately $400,000 match if you were to proceed with the full amount. In order to evaluate project cost closer to that $500,000 consideration, we did work with the architect to review which items may be able to be considered to be removed. At the time, the primary items that could be done either at a future date as part of a second phase or a future phase or separately altogether were the roof replacement, which again, from the get-go was considered an additional or an add-on item, which that was about $156,000 for that. In addition, the concession area window replacements and the any other slab finishing within the concession stand. So essentially, the concession stand would not be touched during this phase, and that could be left for a future phase. And then the new lockers was one other item. And with those revisions or those reductions in scope, we were able to get the total project cost a little bit closer to that $500,000 project. As has been discussed, we have been looking to try to identify additional grant funding or work with the current funding source, DCNR, and the LWCF program to see if there is possibilities for additional funding to become available. And one of the recommendations or considerations that I would offer is that the project could potentially be bid with those additional items as add alternates or alternates to the project. And with that, if either the bids come in lighter than expected or within reason, and some or all of those could be considered, or if additional grant funding has become available, then those can be considered at that time. And lastly, just a tentative project timeline that has been prepared would include, if we were given the okay to begin design or to at least move forward from this conceptual phase into the next phase of development and design. If we started in March, we would be looking at a July 13th council award, which with that award timeline would allow us to provide a notice to proceed and begin construction in September, right after the pool season ended. But that is, again, the considered timeline. But we did want to have that discussion and get any feedback from council regarding the proposed scope to proceed with.
So thank you, Dennis. And I'm going to just recap a little bit because those numbers were very small on our screen.
I'm sorry.
The total project cost is about $799,000. The revised lower, the reduced scope that they have explored to split this into a phase 1 and phase 2. The reduced scope is $536,000, and the 4 items that were removed were the roof, which it has an existing roof. We thought if we can certainly reuse that roof. It will need to be replaced at some time. And we thought if we can get it funded with grant funding, let's do it all at once. But it is certainly still in usable shape. So the first item that was removed was the roof. The second item removed was the concession stand rolling window. The third item was a little bit of slab sealing and finishing related to that concession stand area. And then the fourth item was the new lockers. And the idea there is that we can we can use our own lockers and install new lockers at a later time. We don't need to put that into this process. So removing those 4 items is what gets us down to that 536 number, which is much more in line with what we have budgeted. I also wanted to, and I can tag in the finance committee to confirm this as well. It was mentioned that the engineers are continuing to look at additional funding sources. This project already did receive grant funding. So it got $250,000 in grant funding with a 50% match. So that $500,000 is already half grant funded and half our match. If we were to get additional funding, it wouldn't be negating any of that from us. It would be building upon the fact that we're already putting in a 50% match, and any additional funds that we were to get, we would have to also add a 50% match.
I think we talked about having this in phases, so those additional items can happen.
Could always be added at a later time, unless, as the engineer said, if we go to a bid process, these are all estimated numbers, but if we do get bids that manage to come in lower, if we include these items as alternate add-ons, then we'll have the flexibility to add some of those back into the same contract without going out to rebid again. So we wanted to share all of this. This is a lot of information. We wanted to share this with council, have discussion. And our big item tonight is on this also. It's not a formal vote, but if we are to stay with this schedule and be able to start construction, go to bid, start construction, and be able to complete that before next year's pool season opens, then we are looking to give them notice to proceed to a final design by next week, really.
Any thoughts, council, or questions? It's a lot. It's a lot.
No, that's a lot. But again, this project is it's not coming out of nowhere. The big change tonight is we're looking at pulling those 4 items out so that we can reduce the cost at this time. Beyond that, I know that was all. Any questions?
I do have one clarifying question and maybe I missed it. I might have left that meeting before this got discussed. But when, and maybe this is a question for you, Dennis, when do we expect to hear back from the federal government about us trying to increase the initial ask?
We don't have a timeline. We've been working diligently on that since last year. Like I said, it is a slow moving agreement. Even to get that agreement, it took almost a year to get that agreement, unfortunately. But we have been working with them, especially if we were working on this timeline. We would hope to hear by sometime this summer, which is why I was kind of recommending too in the time being able to proceed as is, and then those additional items would be listed as add alternates to the contract so that you would not be tied to those, and at the time of bidding would be able to make the decision whether or not to include those. I would want to point out that if we did go that route of not including those, we would still have to go through the federal government and through that grant process just to make sure that there was an addendum to the overall project, since the project did include those items initially. But I'm not too concerned with that, being that they are not directly related to the primary concerns of the site. The primary concern was ADA compliance and upgrading the facilities within the site. So I would hope that would be agreed upon. And we do have Kathy Frankel, who's now working with the Gateway Engineers, who was formerly with the DCNR for 26 years, who has been speaking to DCNR and even the DCNR director just to review this specifically, this issue, and see whether or not we can get that additional funding allocated.
So I guess the initial question for all of council is, is there any opposition, or are there any concerns about doing a reduced scope for the pool house and proceeding with this project with those 4 items removed to be potentially added at a later time, but proceeding with a base scope of the reduced $536,000 design concept?
I mean, I think if the primary goal was updates and ADA compliance, it doesn't look like any of those 4 things is going to affect that. And as long as we're not worried about the roof threatening to work underneath of it, then yeah, I mean, we should be, I'm fine with it. I think it's fine.
The nice thing about a pool house is it's designed, every part of it's designed to get wet. So, yeah.
Yeah. I would anticipate we may get feedback from DCNR, just that we would need to verify that the roof isn't going to fall in on a $500,000 investment or project that would be completed. But that would be something that we'd be able to do, and most likely would want to do regardless, as we're working through this project, just to give everybody that level of feeling that it's okay to not have that included at this time.
So I know the initial budget relative to like the adjustments we're trying to make now, how long is that? That's taken about a year, right? It's been a year gap since the initial, and now we're kind of reevaluating things. And I know that you've built in what, like a 10% buffer there, it looks like.
So yeah, there's a 10% contingency. And even as this was being developed, because at the time we had received input from DCNR and the LWCF process that we were anticipating the additional grant funding. So with that, this is highly conceptual still, these costs and anticipated costs, but I'd say are more on the conservative side as well, just because it was specifically for getting grant funding or looking towards the additional grant funding that could be considered.
I guess
We did get the grant a little while ago, but the budget with 500, that was just, reconfirmed and approved by this council in the state that it was as of November of 2022. So about 4 months ago.
I guess I'm
Yeah,
just,
and sorry, I was
Let's
going to say that original 530, or well, originally the $600,000 grant that was based on, or total project cost, that was from February of 2021. So we are talking about 2 years, which is causing that difference or that inflation in cost.
yeah, I guess is 10% going to be enough? Like, do we have other line items here that aren't going to get in the way of ADA compliance that we should be thinking about as potentials if it continues inflating at the rate things are going, right? If we get closer to granting the money day and then work starts and now we end up with a oh crap situation where we have to make some more cuts,
We should be in the position to know that and be able to make those decisions before we give the contract. So I know he showed, and the text was again small, but he showed the schedule. If we all have no opposition tonight to proceed with the scaled back scope, the engineer will continue to develop this plan, take it to design completion. They will advertise the draft plans, put it out to pre-bid. At that point, it's anticipated to come before council in July. And once we have a contract, if they commit to a price, they've committed to that price. So we will know at that point, once we put bids out and we have bids come back in, we'll know what prices are being offered. If we have nothing we're happy with, I presume we can close it and start fresh or figure out what our next steps will be at that point, and hopefully it doesn't get to that point.
Yeah, and I'd even say as well that we would be working closely with the engineering committee and at those engineering meetings while we're in this design process, as we're identifying, either gaps or where, we may find. As we get further along with design, we're going to get a little bit more specific with the cost. And so we should have a better idea of where things are going to land and if there is anything else that would need to be adjusted at that time. So in May, we should be far enough along that we'd have plenty of those kind of discussion items and be able to take a better look at what the anticipated cost is going to be. Like I said, right now that cost estimate is very high level, just based on, based on a rough conceptual drawing and the items that are anticipated.
Are we all good with this course of action to proceed with going to the next level of design and costing based on the slimmer scope?
yes. Yep.
The next item is also a minor update, the Public Works Building update. We are preparing bid specifications for that, which should take about 2 months. It'll then go to advertising and awarding. We didn't discuss this in detail last week, so just a schedule update. We would anticipate construction, if it advertises and goes to award in the spring, the construction would take 3 to 6 months, which puts it to completion later this year.
I have a question on that. With it was my understanding that Public Works would potentially be doing some of this work. So when you're talking about going out for bid, will all of this be kind of a combined thing, showing us what we'll be doing internally and what we'll be looking for contractors to do?
I would assume we should have much more information when we're getting to that point soon. We didn't. I know we've discussed this in the past, and it's been a few months at least since this was in front of council. And this wasn't discussed at the last engineering meeting either. But as we get closer to bid, we should have more details and a thorough update. That was the plan, that the Public Works building was going to be a phased project. And some of the work we were cutting costs, reducing costs by having our own Public Works do some of the finishing in-house.
Yeah, I would, if I recall correctly, it was never, we were talking about phasing potentially, but that there's never been an intention to spend the full $800,000 that came up as the amount that it would take to complete the building the way they had it specified.
I have no new information on that.
I was pretty sure that we had pretty intense discussions about that at budget time with council.
That's correct.
No new information since our earlier previous discussions. Nothing has changed. The intersection control evaluations, there are a number of intersections that we've been looking at, some of which have been requested by residents. We have done, with our engineers' support, we have done some evaluations of various different intersections. So we'll go through these one by one. We did look at a stop sign at Crafton and North Emily. That one is not merited. There was a study that was done, and there is no need for a stop sign at that location. In several other locations, we also looked at whether a stop sign was merited, and in each of these locations, it is merited. At Willard and Barr, it is merited to have a stop sign, and that one is actually already in place, but we have not formally passed an ordinance, so we'll be doing that tonight. At East Crafton and Stotz, excuse me, that also merits a stop sign. At North Emily and Coulter, at North Linwood and Hardy, and also North Linwood and Highland. Each of those locations were deemed to be to merit a stop sign.
Kirsten, I just want to interrupt you. I made a mistake and initially put this on as we were passing the ordinance tonight. We do have to advertise this ordinance, so the motion is actually to advertise the ordinance.
That's what it
But
said.
that was my mistake.
It's written,
Yeah,
so you
that's
did get it updated.
Yes.
So we do, in order to put a new stop sign, we need to pass an ordinance, and to pass an ordinance, we have to advertise. So that's what's on our agenda tonight. For each of those locations that was found to be to merit a stop sign, we are going to, I would like to make a motion to advertise ordinance number 1678, amending chapter 214 of the Crafton Borough Code of Ordinances, Vehicles and Traffic, to establish stop intersections within the borough at Willard and Barr, East Crafton and Stotz, North Emily and Coulter, North Linwood and Hardy, and North Linwood and Highland.
So moved.
Mr. Mark, second. Discussion.
Just out of curiosity, this may be a question for the engineer. I guess, can we have, just for the record, can we have a little more clarity on which street actually the sign will be on for each of these? For instance, I'm thinking of Willard and Barr. Obviously, it's on Willard going on to Barr. Or is it the other way around? No, right, Willard going on to Barr, but that's exactly my point, is just a little bit of clarity on which street it would be on. I don't know if the engineer can speak to that.
They were on the OneDrive. There's diagrams on there. Yeah, they're really,
Do you want me to try to pull that up?
if you can, yeah. It's pages 3, 4, 5, I think, of that. it's on Doug's. That's it. It's not easy to see. Okay.
All right, so
You
you'll have to
look at
walk through the
1 and
numbers
2.
here, but yeah, there's a one here. Let
Yeah.
me zoom in a little bit. So it looks like for Stoughton and East Crafton, it's on Stoughton going north. The one on Emily and Coulter is on Coulter,
Right.
turning onto Emily, right? See Highland and Linwood, looks like it's on Highland, turning onto Linwood. Linwood and Hardy would be on Hardy, turning onto Linwood. And then Bar and Willard would be on Willard, turning onto Bar. Because each of those will be on the right-hand side, so, and those are the 5.
Thank you.
Great. Any other discussion? Okay, no discussion. There's a motion on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, motion passes.
That's it for my committee.
Kirsten. Okay. All right. Communications, recreation, and community events, Ms. Bollenbacher.
Okay, so upcoming community events. We are going to have a senior dinner on Saturday, May 6th. Hamlin's is going to be catering it. It's going to be a Kentucky Derby theme. I believe that'll be here in the community room, correct? Okay. Next, we have our June 10th car cruise, and they are still looking for some vendors and cars to sign up. So please feel free to do so. Jim is going to, if not already, posted on Savvy Citizen, and it's also being advertised on the board in front of the miniature golf course. So if anybody's interested. We also have a community cleanup coming up the weekend of April 28th and 29th. It's in conjunction with the Arbor Day celebration that we are required to have as a tree community. I believe there will be bags and gloves available at the library 11 a.m. that morning. Also, Mary, I think also is going to give people suggested areas to clean up as well. So anybody who would like to join.
And there will be a shred event by Dan
Yes.
Deasy and Wayne Fontana and a dumpster event too.
Correct.
Where we'll have a dumpster where you can dump some
Yep.
items into it. So it's going to be a very, and that's also during Earth Week too. So it
A lot of
goes
cleaning
into-
up of
yes,
Crafton
lots of things going on that day.
Bring your large items, all your paper you want to shred, and yeah.
And
ready to pick up
prescriptions,
some stuff.
prescriptions too.
Yep,
And
perfect for
prescriptions.
spring cleaning, you know.
Yes,
Yep.
lots of it. The newsletter, articles are due February 27th. And the hope is to publish it and have it in your mailboxes in late March. So anybody who would like to, please do. And then our last item is, of course, the sign, the digital sign. First off, all steps have been taken to get the sign in place. We have all the funding in order, the contractor lined up, all of that. All that's left is for us to discuss, the issue we had about placement. And then if we are to agree, then we just need the approval from council to have it situated. Assessment was done. Jim has some information on that. Also, Jim's going to reach out to the school board at Carlington to talk about potentially removing that big green sign there as well. So Jim, if you'd like to update.
Sure. Actually, I spoke with the president of Carlington School Board tonight. I've been trying to get a hold of him for a couple of days, and he was unavailable last night because his boy plays with the Carlington Cougars, who won their game last night. And the coach of that team is also the coach who coached the teams on that sign that is currently at the pool. So I agreed to not take it down until after, to not have the borough create bad mojo for them as they try to go for state. And we're going to work on what we do with the sign afterwards. We're going to give it back to Curlington, but good luck to them on
Fair.
Saturday for their next game. So we're working on that. He very much appreciated our call before taking it down. Otherwise, we did create this document to look at the different locations that were considered last year. And there was a pretty extensive review of looking at these different ones and this memo. And there were a couple, I did put a couple copies over there so the audience could also see it. We looked at all the different alternatives and most of them either were just not feasible because they increase cost. And for the example, putting it where the rain garden is, or putting it between the two buildings with where there's a sidewalk access to the pool house would be too close to other buildings and would probably conflict with a future right there. Yeah, the one that he's pointing to right now, that would conflict with there's going to be a streetlight possibly put there. So it would conflict there as well. And then the other issue is putting it on the other side of the street, which then would cause a long-term viability because we're not sure what's going to happen with that parcel moving forward. And then the other option was the Borough building. All these are locations that have a lot of traffic. Obviously you put up a sign like this that is going to be advertising. We want to make sure that it has a lot of visibility. And we didn't think that at the Borough building would be as useful as on Crafton or on Steuben, excuse me, where we get much more traffic. So that basically leaves us back to the original location that we had done engineering studies on.
Can we confirm, I know at our last meeting, the drawing that we had of where the sign would be located was actually a fairly sizable area. It could have been, closer to the exit sign or further back. Can we confirm where within that zone it would be?
Yeah, I think there was interest in placing it as close to that exit sign and as far from, so there's as you point out, there's a fairly large rectangle where it could be placed. Pushing it as close to the exit sign as feasible to follow all the engineering drawing was the goal.
That still works.
Yes.
Any other questions? Because if not, then I would like to make a motion to approve the location of the new digital sign.
There's a motion on the table. Any second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Chandler, any discussion?
So do we want to clarify then that we just want to keep it as close to the park exit sign or whatever as possible? Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I think we should probably update the motion because the motion basically says to approve the location.
Location.
Yeah, so if the motion.
Yes, so just so everyone on Zoom can hear too, just proposing an amendment to the motion so that it states we'll be placing the sign as close to the park exit sign as is feasible, as determined by the engineers and contractor, whoever it is that's making that decision. Yeah.
So we have.
Good with Aaron, good with.
I agree.
Chandler.
I'm good with that.
Okay. So
I would-
motion to approve the location. Oh, Mr. Chandler seconded it, right? Yeah, okay. Motion to approve the location of the new digital sign as close to the exit sign as determined feasible by the engineers. Revised motion. Okay.
Are we still on discussion?
Yes.
I would also like to add, I know there were other thoughts on where it could be. I know there was some opposition to that location. But there's also a lot of work that's gone into studying the various options, and the rec board had put a lot of work into choosing that. And I would like to thank them for the effort they put in.
And this information was also public in the newsletter. I believe it was back in the spring of last year. Yes. Yeah, so it's been the location, the makeup of it, who, the donation, everything about the details was on the front page of the newsletter too. Okay, any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Anything else? All right, thank you. Commission vacancy, Mr. Chandler.
Yes, so I have a couple of motions I would like to run through before going through the current open positions. For the first one, I would like to point out that I'm going to put a motion on the table to have David O'Brien added to the Civil Service Commission for the remainder of a 6-year term set to expire on July 1st of 2026. And with that, I just want to add before I actually make that motion that Mr. O'Brien has actually previously served on the Civil Service Commission as an alternate. He was on for the full previous term, which ended at the beginning of this month. And he reapplied, and we discussed with him as well as the chair of the Civil Service Commission, and everybody agreed to have him brought back on again. So with that, I have a motion to appoint David O'Brien to the Civil Service Commission for the remainder of a 6-year term set to expire on July 1st of 2026.
Second.
Ms. Compatello seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, and the other motion that I have is to appoint Emily Babiak to the Civil Service Commission as an alternate for the remainder of a 6-year term set to expire on May 20th of 2026.
Second.
Ms. Compatello seconds. Any discussion? I do want
Does
to
this
mention,
impact a
Yeah.
role that she already plays in
Yeah.
the borough?
that's what we wanted to mention. She sent her resignation in for the vacancy board earlier this week. One of the requirements are that on the Civil Service Commission, you cannot serve in another borough capacity. So she has resigned her position within the vacancy board. We do need, if she's put into this position, we will need to fill her role on the vacancy board.
Do we have a timeline for that? That is something that's more urgent than a commission. Is that
30
right? Is there a?
It does, we are supposed to fill that within 30 days.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Great. And with that, so our current open positions will now just include one alternate on the Civil Service Commission, 2 openings on the library board, one of which we do have an application for. We are working to interview the applicant coming up here soon. One regular and 1 alternate for the zoning hearing board. And then upcoming for 2023, we have a planning commission vacancy that will be open on April 13th of 2023. We have 1 shade tree commission spot that will be open on March 31st of 2023. We also do have an application in for that one as well that we are looking to interview also very soon as well. And then 3 rec board seats at the end of December of 2023 as well. And if you or anybody you know is interested in applying for any of these open spots, please do so at craftonborough.com/commissions. And that's all I have.
And we now have a vacancy on the vacancy.
Yeah,
board.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, now we have a vacancy on the vacancy board as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chandler. COG, Mr. Price.
Unfortunately, I got my dates screwed up and failed to go, even though I agreed. I told Aaron I would go. So that is my apologies. I have connected with Michelle, who is the head of the COG, to make sure that I get information about the meeting, and we'll follow up very soon.
I can tell you that the next meeting is Thursday, March 16th in McKees Rocks. I did get that information. Thank you for the attempt, Jim. I appreciate it.
Okay, great. Community announcements. Our next council meeting is Thursday, March 9th at 7:15. Also, there will be a public hearing prior to that meeting for the club liquor license intermunicipal transfer, and that will be at 6:15 for the next meeting. So 6:15 will be that public hearing, then the council meeting at 7:15. So 2023 summer employment. So we are accepting applications for seasonal positions like pool manager, assistant pool manager, concession manager, head lifeguard, lifeguards, cashiers, attendants, concession stand workers, and public works seasonal. Paper applications can be obtained at the borough office, or you can go to the website and apply. Minimum age is 14 for some of the positions. So 14 and above can apply for the positions. All paper and online applications must be submitted by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, March 15th. Okay. Public comment. At this time, citizens may address the Crafton Borough Council on any issue. Only residents and taxpayers of the Borough of Crafton will be permitted to address the council. Comments on non-agenda items will be taken at the end of tonight's meeting, which is not why we have that on here. That was speaker. I thought I crossed that off before. Speakers will be permitted to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. Groups of people will be required to designate a spokesperson to represent them before the council, who may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Please state your name and physical address for the record. Do we have anybody who'd like to speak? And what about on Zoom?
No hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have anything? All right. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 8:29 p.m. Thank you, everyone.